Today is October 7th, 2025. The landscape of mental health treatment in the United States is shifting. For decades, the primary tools against the crushing weight of severe depression have been a familiar set of pharmaceuticals, talk therapies. These methods help many. Yet, for a significant portion of the population, they offer little to no relief. These individuals are often described as having treatment-resistant depression. They live in a state of chronic despair, a gray world untouched by conventional medicine. Now, a new current of hope is gathering force. It comes from an unlikely source, psilocybin, the psychoactive compound found in certain species of mushrooms. This substance, long relegated to the shadows of counterculture and strict prohibition, is re-emerging in a new light. This renaissance is not driven by anecdote or folklore. It is propelled by rigorous, controlled scientific research. Prestigious institutions like Johns Hopkins University, New York University, Imperial College London have published landmark studies. Their findings are hard to ignore. They show that one carefully administered dose, two carefully administered doses, when combined with structured psychotherapy, can produce substantial and lasting reductions in depressive symptoms. This new science is forcing a national conversation. The power of these findings lies in their ability to challenge long-held assumptions. For over half a century, psilocybin has been classified as a Schedule I substance under the Controlled Substances Act. This classification defines it as having no accepted medical use and a high potential for abuse. It placed the compound in the same category as heroin, effectively shutting down most legitimate research for generations. The new wave of clinical data directly contradicts this definition. It presents compelling evidence of medical utility, particularly for conditions that have stumped clinicians for years. This growing body of evidence is creating a powerful tension. It pits the lived experience of patients and the data of scientists against the inertia of federal law. This tension is the engine of change. As study results filter from academic journals into mainstream news, public perception is beginning to evolve. The image of the magic mushroom is slowly being replaced by that of a promising therapeutic tool. People are seeing friends, family, neighbors struggle with mental health crises that seem insurmountable. The opioid epidemic has also laid bare the limitations and dangers of our existing pharmaceutical toolkit. In this context, the prospect of a new, effective, non-addictive treatment for depression feels less like a radical idea and more like a moral imperative. The public is starting to ask why a substance with such potential remains so restricted. This question is now echoing in the halls of power. The shift in public opinion on psilocybin is not a subtle drift. It is a powerful current gaining speed. As scientific validation grows, the fear and stigma cultivated during the war on drugs are beginning to recede. People are learning to distinguish between reckless recreational use and structured therapeutic application. This nuanced understanding is reflected in recent polling data. Surveys over the past few years consistently show majority support for legalizing psilocybin for medical purposes. That support often cuts across traditional political divides, uniting people who have witnessed the devastating impact of mental illness. When a loved one is suffering, ideological purity often gives way to a pragmatic search for what works. This groundswell of public support is translating directly into local political action. The change is not happening from the top down, but from the bottom up. It began in cities like Denver. In 2019, the first U.S. city to decriminalize personal possession of psilocybin mushrooms. Oakland, Santa Cruz. These municipal actions were bold statements. They signaled local communities would not wait for the federal government to act. They prioritized public health and harm reduction over criminalization, creating small pockets of policy innovation. That created a powerful precedent for others to follow. The movement quickly escalated from decriminalization to regulation. In 2020, Oregon voters passed Measure 109, establishing the nation's first state-regulated program for psilocybin-assisted therapy. 2 years later, Colorado passed a similar, broader measure. This was a far more ambitious step than decriminalization. It created a legal framework for adults to access psilocybin services at licensed facilities under trained facilitators. These state-level experiments are policy laboratories. They are generating real-world data on how to manage, regulate, and safely administer these powerful substances outside clinical trials. These local and state changes create a dynamic tension with federal law. While psilocybin remains illegal federally, a growing number of states are charting their own course. This patchwork of laws creates legal complexities and immense pressure on Washington, D.C. Lawmakers in Congress are forced to take notice when constituents vote decisively for change. The success or failure of Oregon and Colorado's programs will be watched closely by policymakers nationwide. They act as proof of concept. A post-prohibition world is possible and can center safety and public health. The tide of public opinion is no longer just lapping at federal policy's shores. It is beginning to erode its very foundation. The pressure created by public opinion state-level action is not happening in a vacuum. It is being met by a slow but discernible shift within federal agencies. Institutions once seen as insurmountable barriers are showing signs of cautious engagement. The Food and Drug Administration, the gatekeeper for all new medicines in the U.S., has been a key player in this evolution. Recognizing remarkable preliminary data on psilocybin for depression, the agency granted breakthrough therapy designation to multiple psilocybin-based treatments. This is not an approval. It's an acknowledgement that early evidence suggests substantial improvement over existing therapies. The breakthrough therapy designation is more than symbolic. It's a procedural tool to expedite development and review. It gives sponsors more intensive FDA guidance and a potentially faster path to approval. Sponsor example, USONA Institute. Sponsor example, Compass Pathways. The designation signals to medical and investment communities that the FDA takes this research seriously. That helps attract funding for large-scale Phase 3 clinical trials. The FDA's actions have opened a formal, regulated pathway for psilocybin to become a prescription medicine. Alongside FDA shifts, a quiet revolution is occurring in research funding. For decades, psychedelic study was a pariah in federal grants. The National Institutes of Health largely stayed on the sidelines. That is changing. In 2021, Johns Hopkins received the first major federal grant in over 50 years to study a classic psychedelic. The grant funded research into psilocybin as a treatment for tobacco addiction. This renewed federal funding is a watershed moment, moving the field from fringe to mainstream. When the NIH, National Institute on Drug Abuse, begin investing public money, it legitimizes the field. It enables larger, more robust studies to answer questions about mechanism, safety, and efficacy across diverse populations. Federal funding builds the rigorous evidence policymakers need. It shifts conversation from prejudice to data-driven analysis and creates a stable foundation for policy change. The federal government is beginning to invest in finding the answers to regulate these substances responsibly. The federal response to psilocybin's therapeutic potential extends beyond the FDA and NIH. It is also taking root in a department that serves one of the nation's most vulnerable populations. The Department of Veterans Affairs, the VA. America's veterans suffer from disproportionately high rates of mental health conditions: post-traumatic stress disorder, major depression, substance use disorders. For many, existing treatments have proven inadequate, contributing to a tragic and persistent suicide crisis. The VA, as the largest integrated healthcare system in the country, has a profound responsibility to explore any and all promising avenues for healing. And it is beginning to do just that with psychedelics. In a landmark move, the VA recently issued a request for applications to research the effects of psychedelic compounds, psilocybin, MDMA. This represents a monumental shift for an agency that has historically been conservative in its treatment approaches. The VA is not just passively observing the research landscape, it is actively seeking to become a leader in it. This internal push is complemented by pressure from Congress, which has directed funding toward research into psychedelic-assisted therapies for service members and veterans. The focus on veterans provides a powerful moral and political impetus for the movement, framing the issue not as a niche interest but as a national duty. This multi-pronged federal engagement is creating a powerful synergy. The FDA's Breakthrough Therapy designation accelerates the timeline for potential approval. The NIH's funding helps build the necessary scientific evidence. The VA's involvement ensures that a critical patient population is not only included in the research, but could be among the first to benefit from a new treatment paradigm. This alignment of interest across different federal bodies suggests that the question is no longer if psilocybin will be integrated into medicine, but how and when. The bureaucratic machinery of the United States government, often seen as slow and resistant to change, is beginning to grind in a new direction. The implications of this federal thaw are immense. If the ongoing Phase 3 trials for psilocybin in depression are successful, the manufacturer could submit a new drug application to the FDA within the next few years. An FDA approval would be a seismic event. It would force the hand of other federal agencies, most notably the Drug Enforcement Administration. An approved medicine cannot, by definition, remain a Schedule I substance. This would trigger a process of rescheduling, likely moving psilocybin to a less restrictive category like Schedule II. Schedule III. Such a change would dramatically lower the barriers to further research and clinical use, solidifying psilocybin's place in the American medical system. The gears are in motion for a fundamental reevaluation of this ancient molecule. Even with growing momentum, the path from promising research to widespread equitable access is filled with significant policy challenges. The first and most formidable hurdle is rescheduling. Under the Controlled Substances Act, psilocybin remains in Schedule I. That category is reserved for drugs with no accepted medical value and high abuse potential. FDA approval of a psilocybin-based therapy would directly contradict that status. It would legally obligate the Drug Enforcement Administration to reconsider scheduling. But the process is not automatic or simple. It involves scientific review and legal procedure. Decisions will face political pressure from advocates and from opponents. That pressure could lead to delays and legal battles. This leads to another critical challenge: therapist training and certification. A psychedelic experience can be emotionally intense and psychologically demanding. A guide who is unprepared can do significant harm. A guide who is unskilled can do significant harm. A guide who is unethical can do significant harm. So we need robust systems for training, credentialing, and licensing facilitators. Who is qualified to be a guide? What should the training curriculum include? Should guides be licensed medical professionals, or can a new class of facilitators be created, as Oregon is doing? These questions need careful thought and national standards to protect patients everywhere. Finally, intellectual property and market structure are complex issues. Several for-profit companies are leading the charge toward FDA approval. Their investment funds expensive trials, but it raises concerns about patents, monopolies, and treatments being priced out of reach. Will psilocybin therapy be dominated by a few corporations holding exclusive rights? Or will there be room for an open, competitive model that promotes affordability? Policymakers must balance incentives for innovation with preventing deeper healthcare inequalities. As we envision a future where psilocybin is a legal medical tool, the twin pillars of safety and access must form the foundation of our policy framework. Safety extends beyond the session itself. It begins with ensuring the quality and purity of the psilocybin compound. A regulated market must have strict rules for manufacturing, testing, dosage consistency. This is a clear advantage over the current illicit market where potency is unknown and contaminants are a real risk. Regulators will need to create a system of good manufacturing practices akin to those for any other pharmaceutical, ensuring that every dose administered is predictable and safe from a chemical standpoint. The human element of safety is even more complex. The therapeutic relationship is at the core of this treatment model. The powerful and vulnerable states of mind that psilocybin can induce require a therapist or facilitator who is not only skilled, but also deeply ethical. Policies must include a rigorous code of conduct, clear guidelines on physical touch and professional boundaries, and a straightforward process for patients to report misconduct. Because the therapy involves many hours of one-on-one time, the potential for abuse of power is real and must be proactively addressed through strong oversight and accountability mechanisms. Building public trust depends entirely on creating a system that prioritizes and fiercely protects patient well-being. Then there is the formidable challenge of equitable access. Psilocybin-assisted therapy, as conducted in trials, is expensive. It involves at least 2 therapists and many hours of clinical time for a single patient's treatment course. Estimates for a full round of therapy run into the thousands of dollars. If this treatment is not covered by public and private insurance, it will become a boutique therapy available only to the wealthy. Policymakers must work proactively with insurers, Medicare and Medicaid to establish reimbursement pathways from the very beginning. Fair access also means ensuring the treatment is culturally competent and available to diverse communities. Much of the early research has involved predominantly white participants. For this therapy to serve the entire population, future research and practitioner training must actively include people from all racial backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds. Outreach efforts will be needed to overcome historical mistrust of the medical system in many communities. Furthermore, training programs should recruit a diverse cohort of therapists who can provide care that is sensitive to the varied cultural contexts and life experiences of the people they hope to serve. True access is not just about affordability. It is about belonging. The journey of psilocybin from a vilified substance to a potential cornerstone of mental health care is a story of scientific rediscovery and shifting public consciousness. Today, on October 7, 2025, we stand at a critical juncture. The convergence of compelling clinical data, rising public support, and cautious federal engagement has opened a window of opportunity. We have the chance to fundamentally change our approach to one of the most stubborn and devastating illnesses of our time. The promise is immense, but it is matched by the complexity of the task ahead. Moving forward requires not a blind leap of faith, but a series of careful, deliberate steps guided by evidence. The first principle must be to follow the science. The second principle is to prioritize safety and equity above all else. A breakthrough that only benefits the wealthy is not a true breakthrough for public health.